What's up, everybody? Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Morning Cuppa Hockey alongside Colby Cohen. I'm Jonny Lazarus, and we are presented by Betway. If you're going to place a bet on Betway. Please play responsibly, and remember, you must be 19 years of age or older. We're going to do a full Florida Panther breakdown today as we inch closer and closer to the Stanley Cup final. I can't wait for Saturday night. It feels like it's already been forever, but we got a couple more days to go. We're going to bring on Florida Panthers legend Ed Jovanovski, who I think is ready, but we're going to kick it over to Colby first just to get your thoughts in the morning. Or you want to
bring him in? Bring him in. Yeah,
All
let's not waste the time. We get a big star like this for the show. Let's kick it in.
So before we kind of start off with Jovo, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Perasso. So this interview with Ed Jovanovski will be presented by Perasso, the most complete choice for shaving and beard care, made in Italy since 1948. Perasso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Perasso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15 in all caps, Hockey15. Let's bring on the first ever draft pick of the Florida Panthers, first overall in 1994. Played for the Panthers from 1995, 1999. The list goes on and on. I don't got to do this for you, Joe, but what's up?
Yeah.
How's it going?
It's good, man. Good. I'm excited. A few more days here to game 1. Doing a lot of these shows, which is nice to talk about what probably a great series we're going to see here with a lot of star power. I'm really excited for the start on Saturday.
Well, I love how Johnny's just coming right in with the nickname, calling you Jovo. I mean, hey, look, kids these days, man, they don't always understand it, especially my co-host here, Jonny. But I'm sure you don't remember this, and before we get too deep in, I actually got a chance to meet you during the 11 finals. I was healthy scratching with the Boston Bruins for a couple of months that year, and we had a good night out at the Roxy during the 11 finals. It was JR, and there's a big group of people. And I know rarely do you leave the Roxy and have a full accounting of all the people that you were with, but it is good to see you again. Obviously, I remember that, that whole run was a hell of a lot of fun, finished really good for our team, but it's good to see you again, man. And we really appreciate you coming on, because we know that probably everybody and their mother is hitting you up to do these shows right now.
No, my pleasure. Yeah, I don't remember much of that night there. But any night at the Roxy is a good night. But yeah, let's get into it. I think it's going to be an excellent final.
Yeah, I actually want to start off with kind of a fun one, Jovo. Last year, we looked at this Florida Panthers team, and I've kind of been around them a little bit now, just, within the media and whatnot, in their room when they're in New York at Madison Square Garden. And, last year we were saying this team's cocky. They got a lot of swagger. And it's possible that they're even cockier this year and have more swagger this year, but also a little bit more humble at the same time, if that makes sense. But this brand of the Florida Panthers, I don't know if I've ever seen a hockey team like this just in my lifetime. But for you, I mean, being in Florida for as long as you have, what can you say about just the overall swagger of this team right now?
Well, they got swagger and they're healthy. So you put both together. You look at last year. I mean, they had a swagger. I don't think you get that far, in the playoffs without feeling confident and have that swagger. This year, they're feeling good about their game. They're healthy. And, you look at the group, the way they play. I mean, there's really no, for whatever reason you want to call it, any holes in their game, right from the goaltender through their D, mobile, up in the play, big. You look at a lot of teams that win the Cup. Go back to 11. I mean, when Boston, you guys won it. I mean, this horses on the back end. So they have that, and they have a deep lineup. And when you go up and down their lineup, they don't have to necessarily worry about who's on the ice if they're on the road and they're looking for matchups. I think Coach Maurice has the utmost confidence in all his guys to go out there and do the job. So when you kind of put all that together, I think they're primed to have, an excellent series. But you still got to play the games, and you still got to respect the Edmonton Oilers. They're a very good team. They got a lot of star power. Their goalies seem to have figured it out the last couple games. And it's all these kind of little inner games. The what I'm most intrigued about is the matchup, McDavid, Barkov. How's that going to play out? So how are coaches going to get away from that matchup, per se. So overall, lot of kind of unique storylines, heading into this playoffs.
Well, and you think about the embarrassment of riches that Paul Maurice has. You mentioned going back to 11, whether it was Seidenberg and Chara or Boychuk, and then you had McQuaid, you had you're right. It's a similarity to the back end, these big, heavy men who really just can grind you down. But, let's say McDavid finds himself away from Sasha Barkov. Who's standing right behind him is Gustav Forsling, who, has just been, such a revelation and is probably the best contract in the entire NHL right now. But it kind of leads me to the question, when I look at Florida, what is their strength? Because you said there's no hole. They're down the middle. They're unbelievably good. They're big and heavy back end. Their goaltending is world class. What is the actual strength? Is one thing better than the other? Are they just so good everywhere that you can't pick one area?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think you can really kind of focus on one area. I mean, there's so much talk about this team, how they forecheck. And when this team, you look at the previous years, this team never liked to dump the puck. They were always a rush team. They always led the league in scoring chances off the rush. But you see now, I think a couple of years ago when Maurice kind of just backtracking a little bit, Maurice came and said, listen, the team can score goals. You just can't win championships playing this way. So they buttoned down in certain areas. They found ways to win hockey games when the games were close. They do a layered system where if you're going to get one guy beat in the defensive zone, you're going to have to go through the next guy and the next guy to get to the net. And I think they defend so well. That comes with personnel. Obviously, you mentioned Gustav Forsling, who's as steady as they come on the back end. Him and Ekblad have been a deep pairing that probably going to see a lot of McDavid. But I mean, I really can't I think they're just good at everything they do. Look at that lineup. Like I said, there's no weakness on that group. They don't deviate from their game, which is a huge thing. Come playoff time, if you're down a goal or you're down 2 goals, we've seen teams come back in these hockey games. There's no reason to change. And I think they're so disciplined that way on sticking the course that they find themselves back in games or really burying teams.
Jovo, you said something before that actually was super interesting, the Barkov-McDavid matchup, right? And you look at the two of those guys and the conversation, I feel like for years now, when you ask who's the most underrated player in the NHL, it's always Alexander Barkov for whatever reason, right? It's always him. But you look at the production.
Not underrated by his peers.
No.
It's underrated to the fans.
Yeah, the general fan. But Barkov's production, point a game right now in the playoffs, conference final, 4 points in 6 games was -4, which objectively isn't great, but his impact felt so much more than that. So for this, I don't want to say, is it sort of the prove it series for Barkov? Because to me, he already has. But for the hockey fans that are tuning into the Stanley Cup final, is this Barkov's moment more than it might be McDavid's?
I mean, it could be. I think you get to this point, right? You want to be that guy to continue playing well. He's the captain of this team. He's the leader. He does all the little things. We can go on and on about Barkov's game. How 200-foot player, how responsible he is in every area. He's a big body, but I think this is. Listen, you get to this point, you want it to be kind of. That stamp of, hey, listen, you lead your team to a Stanley Cup. But I don't think Barkov puts that pressure on him. I think he's really confident in his own game, that I think if he plays the way that he's expected to play, that he's going to have a big effect on this series, not only offensively, but on the other side as well, with the big task at hand, stopping all that star power on the other side. Now, it's not going to be one guy, right? Collectively, everybody's got to do their job and everybody's got to tug the same way. But overall, he touches so many areas of a hockey game, and a lot of the areas that maybe your regular hockey fan really doesn't pick up on. But, people that are around the game, they know him backtracking and picking up a pass in the defensive zone or pickpocketing someone and going back the other way. I mean, he's noticed throughout the hockey world.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. He's a Selke winner again. I'm excited to see him. He's such a good kid. He's such a humble guy. Doesn't say much. He's not a big raw guy, but he's the first on the ice in practice. He's the last one to leave. He's a workhorse, and hopefully all that will pay off for him here in the finals.
His stick honestly reminds me of like what Zetterberg and Datsuk used to do. I mean, I remember playing against those guys at the Joe one night, and Footy was basically like, look, no, don't try any cute triangle passes, don't try any seam passes, because these guys, they make you feel like they have it, they take it away. And I see Barkov, like, he just uses his stick as an absolute weapon on both sides of the puck. I mean, it's been fun to watch him on the bigger stage, because you're right, he doesn't get the same notoriety because he plays down in Florida, and they don't get the ABC Saturday games, and they should, but they don't. Those games happen between the Rangers and the Bruins, and so we'll see what happens there. But there's another centerman on this team, Ed, that I really want to ask you about, a guy that I feel like has really sort of found his niche. And that's Anton Lundell. He's a former first round pick a couple of years ago. This is only his third year. I think people kind of forget that because he does play pretty mature, but he seems to me to really have settled into that role, and that third line role of just being a 200-foot complete heavy centerman. What have you seen? I mean, obviously you're on the broadcast for those guys, so you're around that team. Are my eyes lying to me, or have you kind of seen the progression in his game that makes you feel really good about having him as your guy down the middle?
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think when you look at him on that third line, I have a feeling that that's where this series could separate. I mean, you look at the depth of the top two lines on both teams; they're great. As we go down the lineup, I think Lundell, Luosterainen, and Tarasenko. It could be a very effective line, but we obviously see him the last few years. There's stretches in his game where he kind of tails off, and that could be youth, could be fatigue, the system, playing against, elite players. But as the season goes along, Maurice, you can see him putting him in key situations, taking key faceoffs. Something's not happening on the power play. He's the guy that's going, which we've seen here, in the playoffs. But he's a very high intellect player, and I wouldn't think otherwise, because look who he's hanging out with. Barkov. Yeah, that's his guy, and he's come out and said, listen, I couldn't have a better mentor coming to this situation. Watching what Captain does each and every day. I think they spent some time living together, so that effect has really rubbed off on him. But he's a very, he's got a high hockey IQ, almost like a Sam Bennett type player when you really think the game well. I think Anton at a young age has really grasped on what his role will be in the NHL. And that could expand a little bit more as he gets a little bit more comfortable and a little more confidence, knowing that he can be a 20 to 30 goal guy in this league.
The confidence is definitely there. I think Colby and I joked about it last week. It was Lundell and I think Luosterainen who, like, back-to-back shifts in Game 5 went between their legs on Shesterkin, trying to roof it on him. I mean, in what world do you see third liners in a Game 5 doing that? Right? Like,
that's the new norm in the
yeah. That's what I said.
We joked about it, but
exactly what I said. Every fourth line guy can pick it up on their stick now, spin around.
Even Rempe, Colby?
Do a lacrosse? No, not Rempe. Everybody but Rempe.
But he'll get there. Huh? He'll get there. He'll probably get there. I saw his interview last night. He's got big plans on working on it.
He does.
But yeah, you're right. Just quickly going on your fourth line. There's no more fourth line playing 2 minutes in this league. That's how good these guys are. Everyone's got to be able to play. So it's a nice mix of the guys on this group, especially.
Yeah, and kind of going back to that Ranger series a little bit, but also tying it into this. Florida did a great job at not getting into the shit after the whistle, right? Like, they really controlled their emotions because they didn't want to put the Rangers in the power play, obviously. And even when they did, they shut it down pretty well. How do you see this series being officiated? Because, obviously you have Connor McDavid on the other side, and the league has always been a little bit more protective of him, right? So with Florida and how they like to be a little bit of bullies, do you think they tone that back a bit, or do you think they try to get in 97's head right away?
Well, I don't think you can change the way you play. I think I hope to God we don't see, a penalty on, I think it was Suter, the game. And,
oh my God. Oh, that was terrible.
It was so embarrassing that these are called. I don't see Florida getting away. I mean, that is their game, getting in hard. If you want to play a physical game, the team will play a physical game. You want to run and gun, and they can play that style as well. But I gotta believe that a focus is going to be, time and space. The old cliche, take it away from McDavid, bump him whenever you can. Draisaitl the same way. It might be a little bit tougher feet, kind of knocking him around. He's 30 man. But yeah, I think this team, you don't want to give the Oilers with that power play unnecessary penalties and power plays, take stupid penalties after the whistle. But I think if the scrums are there, I mean, it's part of the game, and you'll kind of continue getting in there and try to agitate whatever way you can. But I think Florida's done a great job playing between the whistles and leave the garbage kind of to the side. But if you want to get into that, obviously, with Matthew, he's one of the best at it, getting in there after a whistle. But overall, I think play between the whistles. You want a great series. You want the officiating, at the end of the day, to be somewhat equal on the penalties. And we'll see where that goes. But I don't see any drop-off as far as the way this team has played heading into the Cup final.
Yeah, I think that's what makes Florida so difficult, is the fact that they can play so many different ways. They have guys like Bennett and Tkachuk that can play a skill game. They can play a run and gun game, or they can, they can play the way that I kept referring to Florida in the last round, and Jonny covers the Rangers. Like, that's kind of his home base. That's his team. They're like an NFL team that runs the ball 80% of the game. They grind you down and they forecheck, and then their D are so mobile. They retrieve pucks. It's as complete as that I've seen from a team in a long time. Look, I know you got to run here. You got another minute or two, but I want to go a little off the board with the last thing I want to ask you, unrelated to the Florida Panthers, because, Wayne Gretzky's all over TV right now. And in any time he talks, I feel like everybody on their couch is just like, they're ready to listen to him, right? So awesome having him on TNT. You played for him in Phoenix, and you were there potentially during the whole JR, Gretzky situation. JR was like refusing to go on the ice. JR's told me these stories. What was playing for Gretzky like, and just like being around that? Like I was saying to Jonny before you came on, one of the coolest things like about, your career to me, and I'm not trying to age you, I'm going to be 36, but so I got to watch you growing up, and then you were still playing when I was coming in, and had my little cup of coffee in the NHL. I was mostly an American League player, but, guys like that, you got to touch the generation and play through the generation of Sakic and you and all those guys. And then also, I was in San Antonio when you were in Florida at one point. And so all those guys, Trocheck, Shore, Gilroy, like all those guys, like, you touched all these generations. You played for Wayne Gretzky. So, and
then Jans and Biz too, right?
You had them all, right? Like they all kind of, you're like, you got like a coaching tree now almost. So what was Gretzky like as a coach? Like, what was that like? And just these different generations of hockey players to where we're at now.
Well, he was great. I mean, as kids growing up, I mean, obviously the Gretzky factor, you're just like, in awe. And, I think for me, I had the experience, in 2002, with him at the Canadian Olympic team. And, so I was around Wayne, and obviously I remember the first time playing against him, I was just like lining up next to him. And I'm like, is this really kind of happening? It's probably the same thought that every player has, anytime you faced Wayne or on the same ice as him. But listen, he was a passionate guy. He cared about his players. He wanted to win. He wanted to win, to the point where I think he just didn't understand that guys couldn't do things like he did. And I really say that because he had a soft spot for young players. And we had young, Mikhail Bodker. He wasn't ready to play.
Yeah, I remember him.
Tikhonov, He wasn't ready to play. Kyle Turris wasn't ready.
Yep, none of them were.
But he kept playing them, and he had that because he was in that same boat, and he wanted to see everyone excel and do better. But I think at some point, like, he would sit back on the bench and be like, geez, man, like, what's going on here? Why can't these guys do it? And it's a tough league. I mean, we all know it, right? It's a tough league at a young age to come in, especially at the forward position, you know, to play against men now when you're a teenager and have success. But overall, what I take from Wayne is he loves his players. He'll do anything for them. He's easy, you know, very approachable guy. And his passion for the game, not only then, but now, it's the best game in the world. And he makes sure he lets the globe know that it is the best game and the toughest trophy to win.
Yeah, a lot of those guys were from my draft, so I'm familiar with Bodker, and you know, I played against him quite often.
Right.
He's a talented guy, but you see it, guys. Sometimes they come too early, and then it never actually works out, and you always wonder, like, what would another year of college done for that guy, or junior, or the American League? And so it's funny that you mentioned some of those names. I you know, Vinny Trocheck is kind of on the other side of it. He spent some time in the American League. He worked his way through. He went through a couple of teams, and now look at what he's found as a niche in the NHL.
I think what is for this case, you know, the Florida Panthers, they have that luxury now, being able to draft a player and kind of let him ride the bus. You know, let him experience, as Biz and Witz call it, the jungle, just to see what that and grow as a player and as an individual, turn into an adult. And now when you come up, you know, you're a little bit more seasoned. You got some age on you. You filled in your body a little bit, and it's not going to come easier, but I think you have a better understanding, you know, of the game. And I think teams that are not so rushed on bringing in their talent, that do a good job bringing in veterans, and you have some time to let these guys develop, it's necessarily not a bad thing.
Well, Florida also has the luxury of being able to sign whoever they want because everyone wants to come play there, so they can take as much time as they need.
Right. Yeah, you got the one issue with the salary cap, but you got to be smart about it. And obviously Bill Zito has come into this situation, not just giving the checkbook to anyone, really thought out character guys. You got a busy off season trying to get these guys done.
I love how Paul Maurice calls the UFAs all assholes, so nobody else gets them.
Lazy bums. They don't work hard. They got an interesting summer ahead of them.
All right, well, Jovo, we got to let you go here, and we really appreciate your time. But before we do, we are required to ask your Conn Smythe pick for the Florida Panthers if they win the Stanley Cup.
Sergei Bobrovsky.
All right. Good pick. But we appreciate your time. Hope you enjoy the final. Hope there's a fun party in Fort Lauderdale the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, however long this series goes. I think it's the whole month of June. But
right, can you imagine June 24th, Game 7?
Be pretty sick. Yeah. Thanks, Jovo. We appreciate your time.
Anytime.
That was awesome. Really cool.
Good job. Look, give producer Vic some love and some clicks for reaching out to Ed Jovanovski, and you know, it's funny, like, you know, he was talking about how you feel that way against, you know, Gretzky. Look, obviously I never played against him, right? But I would say you feel that way against any of the big time players that you watched growing up when you step out on the ice with them. I mean, the first time I stepped out on the ice and I saw Adam Foote and Joe Sakic and Milan Hajduk, it was like, holy shit, you know, and you have to quickly forget about these things. But there's definitely moments where even when you're sitting on the bench and like, you're like, hey, Footy, can I have that water when you're done? Like, they pass you the water bottle. It's just, you know, these moments are moments that you really never forget. And, you know, you've got to appreciate them. And in the moment, you probably don't appreciate them enough because things are happening so fast and you're 21 years old. But, you know,
21.
21. Yeah.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah. I played 3 years of college.
You were a true freshman?
I was a true freshman. Yeah, man.
Yeah, you were kind of sick at hockey.
I was a second round pick for a reason. I just stopped getting better too early. I peaked.
I was a freshman when I was 21.
I peaked. I peaked a little too early. So, look, I do see in the chat a lot of Oilers. There's a lot of Oilers conversation in the chat right now. Just so you guys know, tomorrow's Oilers day. We're going to spend the whole episode, or at least 30, 40 minutes tomorrow talking about the Oilers. We reached out to Jason Greger to see if he's going to come on potentially in the morning. We may have an Oilers player lined up for tomorrow. We shall see. We're waiting for confirmation on that, and we're hoping that we can bring that to you. It might be a mobile situation because I think they're traveling tomorrow, but we'll see what we can do there. But we definitely will spend more time talking about the Oilers, talking about kind of how matchups can go their way. And look, I think the Oilers are probably a deeper team, and there's probably been more guys that have stepped up. I think not deeper than the Panthers, but deeper than I think people realize, because I think other players have stepped up in the bottom of their lineup. But we shall save that stuff for tomorrow. But look, I thought it was interesting hearing him talk about Anton Lundell and Luosterainen. And
they were the difference makers in Game 5 and Game 6.
People don't realize this. Lundell was the 12th overall pick in 2020. Right? Isn't 2020 the laugh draft? Or is he 19? Like that's that draft, right? And
Byfield, I believe, right?
You look at the way that these Finnish, the good Finnish NHL players, man, they just, there's something about the discipline in their game. Like, when do you see a Finnish player in the NHL who cheats for offense? When I say cheats, or cheats on the wrong side of the puck, you just don't see that. These Finnish guys, man, they play such an honest game. So,
he was one pick ahead of Seth Jarvis.
Right. So, he was a high end pick, and look, he's probably it's the fact that he's able to play on the third line and be a little bit sheltered behind some of these other star players. That's probably the difference. I mean, when they didn't have Matthew Tkachuk, he's playing further up the lineup as a first year player, and Jovanovski just talked about the fact that, that type of thing isn't good. So look, if you're enjoying today's episode, hit that like button. You guys have been amazing about that the last couple of shows. We had a few hundred 2 days ago. Yesterday was pretty good as well. The support that you guys have been giving us, and the community that this show seems to be building has been unbelievable in the playoffs. Like, you guys consistently come in every day. I know some of your teams have been, are out. I know I saw some of our Carolina guys in here yesterday. We had some Islanders discourse all over social media yesterday. So we do appreciate the fact we got Chef Richard, who's a Winnipeg guy. Like, we just have a great mixture of people. Jeremiah, who's always here, out in Alaska. Probably still dark in Alaska right now, but the fact that, you guys are here, you're showing up every day. It's not games that we're previewing right now every night. And so we really appreciate that. So hit that like button. If you're not subscribed to the DFO YouTube page, subscribe, see if you like it. There's content all day, DFO live at noon, fantasy hockey, draft coverage from Stephen Ellis. You've got Frank Saravalli's Frankly Speaking. You've got the podcast with Gregor and Frank, where they look at things. So, make sure you check all that stuff out. After us, you've got Leafs Morning Take over on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. They're all part of, this Nation network, Oilers Nation, Daily Faceoff, Leafs Nation. We're all Canucks Army. It's all one group of people under the same umbrella. So again, hit that like button. It goes a long way, Johnny.
Yeah, very well said. And, I would love to extend my gratitude to everybody as well, but I'm not going to reiterate what Colby just said just because it was perfectly said. Do you want to stick on the Panthers still, or kind of get into our next topic?
I want to get into and talk a little bit about the Panthers back end and their decor. And I don't know, Vic, if you could toss that up on the screen. Because look, I asked him, Ed Jovanovski what the strength of the team was. And while, yeah, like Barkov, Bennett, Lundell, Stenlund down the middle is unbelievable. You've got, he talked about the third line probably where you see the biggest advantage start to lean Florida's way. But, for me, I think the difference in these two teams, besides in net, I do think it's the back end, because I think when you look at the depth of this back end, Catherine Craig says Columbus Blue Jackets. So see, we've got a nice array of people that come in here, and but back to this team's back, their decor. I mean, you just look at the size. Nobody's under 6 feet tall, right? Everybody's big and strong. You've got Montour, who's the smallest defenseman. He doesn't.
Is he 6 foot?
Small. He's 6 feet. Yes, he is. We've looked into this before. But like Ekman Larson and Kulikov, again, you think about Edmonton's third pair, right? You think about their back end. And while I think Nurse found his game a little bit more and simplified in the latter part of the series, I think advantage Florida Panthers as far as depth on the back end goes. Where is the weakness, right? Like, you obviously would love to have Forsling out against McDavid, right? And then if you have to have Mikola's pair out against, Draisaitl, I don't see a huge difference between having Mikkola, Montour, or Ekman Larson Kulikov out against Draisaitl's, line. Do you, Johnny? I just think you're okay either way.
I think Ekman Larson is another player that Jovo actually played with in Phoenix, which is crazy, right? That he played
probably
with
did. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
But listen, I think if you're Florida, you're confident in all three, right? They haven't proven it otherwise. Like, Kulikov was a monster in the Rangers series, I thought. I know there was a play where Lafreniere dangled him, but that was the only play where he stood out in a negative way.
Play defense long enough, you're getting dangled by good players.
Heiskanen got dangled by McDavid, and it happened. It happened. But I thought they were solid the entire time. And to your point, Colby, like the Florida Panthers, where the Rangers struggled the most was getting inside. They box out so well, and the second and third opportunities weren't really there. And Edmonton, it's the speed of Edmonton maybe where Florida might struggle a bit more, but Florida's a pretty quick team too, and their D, for what they might lack in foot speed, they make up for in physicality, right? Like, you don't have to have the fastest players back there, but if they're getting their bumps, and I don't know if that's a phrase that you're familiar with, that's what my assistant coach in junior, Josh Nelson, always told me, get your bumps. Like, whenever you're away from the puck, just give the forward a little nudge, make him feel you. And Florida does that, and I think that's going to be something that right from game one, we asked Jovo this about getting to McDavid. Connor McDavid is going to have the most miserable playoff series physically that he's probably ever had.
It's definitely going to be a more physical playoff series but again, I think some players, and I think McDavid, and again, we were trying our hardest to leave Edmonton for tomorrow, but
this is a part of that.
I think I don't. Physicality when it comes to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, it might bring out even more in them. They may play even better against physical play just because it's going to get them into these games, get them engaged even more. Not that they're not already, but when a team is going to be physical, you're kind of bearing in and leaning a little bit heavier, a little bit more. So, I think that is going to be completely true, Johnny, that it is going to be a more physical series, and there is going to be more ground and pound, and especially the third pair of the Edmonton defensive core. And I think Broberg has done a good job since he came in. But again, Brett Kulak, I don't think Kulak would be in the lineup for the Florida Panthers. I don't think Broberg would be in the lineup for the Florida Panthers. No. I don't think Desharnais would be in the lineup for the Florida Panthers. So I do think there's a number of defensemen on the back end. Look, Evan Bouchard has been out of this world phenomenal on both sides of the puck, right? Nurse can simplify and play heavy.
Can I ask you a question about the Panthers? Just specifically while we're on this, where would you rank the Ekblad-Forsling pairing amongst top pairs in the NHL?
Right there with any top pair. I mean, especially the way they're playing right now, because, again, some teams top pair has one really dynamic offensive guy, like a Roman Yossi, and then
Well,
like a more of a shutdown guy with them, right?
I got the question yesterday about Fox Lindgren versus Ekblad and Forsling, and I was like, I think 10 out of 10 times now I'm taking Ekblad Forsling.
Yeah, well, because they're bigger, they can move the puck. Sure. Do they give you the dynamic offensive ability that Adam Fox gives you? No. And look, Fox was injured, right? The guy couldn't move laterally. And I'm going to tell you this about Fox, okay? He did not let on fully to what his injury was. He didn't. His injury, more than he let on. 100%. I know it for a fact, okay? I know it for a fact. So, but he doesn't want to be an excuse guy. He didn't even want to talk about it, but he had to talk about it a little bit. All I can tell you is that he maybe gave you 15% of what he actually has going on from an injury standpoint. So Adam Fox is a Norris Trophy winner. He's a dynamic defenseman. He's got more up here than most guys have on their entire roster, right?
Yeah,
so,
anyone.
So I'm not going to, and Lindgren.
No, this was no discredit to those guys.
To me, that is a high-end first pair for the new, like that is a high-end first pair defensive group for the Rangers. I'm not down on those guys like a lot of people are based on the playoffs. I'm not saying you are.
I want to be clear that I'm not either, but I'm just crediting those other two.
If you're giving me the opportunity to have 2 6'2" and bigger, 3 and bigger guys who can skate and who can move the puck and who can play physical and who, by the way, can add offense. I mean, look at some of the goals Forsling's had in the playoffs. They've been big-time goals, big-time shots. I'm probably going that way, Johnny. I really am. I'm probably going to sit there and take Florida's top pair, especially, again, give a little recency bias. They're playing really well right now. And so the question that I want to kick back to you here, and this is actually a question for everybody in the chat as well. Is Sergei Bobrovsky in that top tier of like the 5 goalies? Like, how good is he?
We're doing this again.
Well, hold on. We're giving Bob the edge over Skinner in this series. And I think everybody is doing that, right? Yeah. But my question would be, is Bob's that good, or is the team around him that good? And does the team around him protect him a lot? Like, you know, I don't necessarily think they protect him because they do give up breakaways and they do give up opportunities. But is Bob ever under the same type of offensive pressure that Shesterkin was, that Vasilevsky was, that Jeremy Swayman was? Because I haven't seen that.
Well, maybe not as much this playoff, but last year he sure as shit was. You know, dude, the Sergei Bobrovsky we saw in last year's playoffs, they're not even sniffing the second round without him. And he didn't even start the playoffs from like we've had this conversation a million times.
Alex Lyon got them into the playoffs and then started the playoffs.
But to your point, last year, I think he and Tkachuk certainly carried them. This year, it's been more of a well-rounded collective effort.
Yes.
You know, and maybe this playoff, Bobrovsky, you know, hasn't been peppered nearly as much, but he's still been there and made the timely saves.
He has made the timely saves. He has. So, but my question is he still a Vezina caliber goalie, or is he a very good goalie who's a product of his environment?
I kind of think both can be true. I do.
Okay, but I'm asking you to pick one.
You're asking to pick one?
Who's a better goaltender, him or Igor Shesterkin?
Igor Shesterkin.
Who's a better goaltender, him or
Swayman.
Andrei Vasilevsky?
Vasilevsky.
Who's a better goaltender, Bobrovsky or Swayman?
Swayman.
So those three guys are better, but he's now playing. But
I might take Bob over Ottinger.
That was my next question.
Bob
over Ottinger. Who are you taking?
Because Bob at least has the consistency. Like when do you really see Bobrovsky?
At least he does. He did this year, and he does in the playoffs this year. Yeah. Last year he was not as consistent. You know, remember. We just,
playoffs.
Well, but even going into playoffs last year, he down the stretch, he didn't play either. So, you know, he's had his moments. Now, did you see the tweet from John Butchergross yesterday? It was a screenshot from a text conversation with John Tortorella, who said that Bob, it was just one line from the conversation.
Okay.
It was that Bob is the most focused athlete he ever coached in his life. And Torts doesn't strike me as the guy to say that without really meaning it. which is interesting because you watch Bob, he's very stoic on the ice. When do you ever see a lot of emotion out of him like you did Igor Shesterkin in the last round, who got very animated at times when he didn't like the way things were going? Bob just never really shows emotion.
Yeah,
and
stoic.
I think being even keeled is probably a great strength of his, because your players feel that. When you feel your goaltender is in total control, it gives you a little bit of a different energy and a little bit of a different confidence, especially when you're going back on pucks, when he's playing the puck. When there's a breakaway, you feel like you might not have to take the guy down because you've got that guy behind you. So it's a good question, and it's not his fault that we're talking about it, because his team is what his team is, right?
Also, I should have just fucking said this before, but you asked me if Bob's better than Vasilevsky, Bob's better than Swayman, Bob's better than Shesterkin. He just beat all three of those guys. Is that why you asked it? Is that why you asked it in that order? It is. I didn't even put that together. Because
I had a feeling you were going to say all three of those goalies were better, but who's still standing right now?
But here's where hockey is here's where hockey is the most random and wild and best sport ever. Because would it not be so typical of this sport if the Panthers and Pavelski take down those three and then end up falling short to Stuart Skinner?
Yeah, it could. And
it would be typical.
It very well could happen. But here's another thing to keep in mind. Okay. And this is why hockey's different than other sports.
I'm such an idiot that I didn't put that together.
You said it. I told Karen I wouldn't call you an idiot for a while. So I'm not calling you an idiot. You're calling you an idiot. But so here's something to keep in mind. Okay. In the NBA, LeBron James can play the entire game, right? He might come off the floor for a couple of minutes. What do they play? 12-minute quarter?
42 or 48 minutes a night easily.
Okay, but in a big game, he could play 48 minutes. He could.
Josh Hart played every minute of every game in the next playoff.
Okay.
Besides, the last one.
In the NFL, you're playing half. You're playing half the game, right? In baseball, baseball's a little bit different.
You
but
3 bats, dude.
We'll just stay with football and hockey right now and basketball. in the NHL, the most a player ever plays in a game is 25, 26 minutes. A goalie plays 60 minutes. Okay. And this is back to the argument with Frank yesterday, when people are saying you don't need to invest in goaltending. You can kind of, pick it and piece it together. And I feel like only people and only organizations that don't have goaltending think like that. If you could have one of these premier star goalies, you get them, you keep them, you sign them long-term, and you do what you do to make them happy, because they're going to give you a chance to win a cup every year. And other teams are going to need more luck, more bounces, more star players that step. So, for the guy who plays 60 minutes a night, how is that not your most important player? How can you sit here and tell me goaltending is not the most important position when they're the only guy who plays the entire game?
I feel like I'm just going to lose this argument no matter what. I'm trying to think.
It's not an argument.
Listen,
it's not an argument whatsoever. It's just something to chew on, right?
But we've seen what having that strength in the blue line can do. Like, if you have to pick a strong blue line or an elite goalie, I think the strong blue line has won almost every time. No, like, we just saw it happen with Shesterkin and with Sway. We just watched this, and those are the best goalies in the game. But the stronger blue line won.
Right. But and I agree with you, but let's think about it like this. What if the Boston Bruins had, good goaltending, not great goaltending, you're saying the stronger blue line won, but then you can flip that back the other way. Like, those series were kept a lot tighter by the goaltender. Like, goaltenders stood on their head. The goaltenders did everything and anything that they could do. It is a team sport. Hockey's more of a team sport, than basketball is. It just is, right? Yeah. One guy's got the ball the entire night in basketball. So, that's why you need balance. That's why NHL teams haven't won a lot of cups with players making more than $10 million a year. This is a different scenario with McDavid at the number he's at. But even Draisaitl's at cap hit is only $8.5 million because of when he signed it. Now his next one's going to be way and well above that. but it's why NHL teams who have
okay.
a core four with all their money given up, hint, hint, wink, wink, they don't win. They don't win come playoffs. They're not deep enough.
Who's in your opinion, the second best goalie in the NHL?
Thatcher Demko.
You think he's the second best goalie in the NHL?
Yeah, behind Igor Shesterkin.
Okay. Who do you think is like the second best number one center in the NHL?
I'd have to go look at rosters. I don't,
okay,
I mean, you've got McDavid, McKinnon probably would be one and probably 1-2.
Would you rather have McKinnon on your team or Demko on your team?
Demko. I'd probably take Demko.
Come on.
Yeah. I mean, you're
full of shit.
Well, what are my but can I have Swayman or Sorokin if I take McKinnon? Like, are we talking about like a snake draft?
You can have Cam Talbot.
Then I would take if I could have McKinnon and Cam Talbot, or I could have Demko and
you can have Demko and you can have who's like Barkov's really good. Sorry.
Listen, again, you're not.
I'm trying to think of like a weak number one center.
Could you ever win a Stanley Cup with Cam Talbot as your goalie?
I think you could if you had the right roster in front of him.
When's that going to happen?
Well, Kemper won one with McKinnon.
Yeah, with the best blue line in the NHL.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I don't know if anyone's taking Demko over McKinnon. Come on. I don't know. But I'm just trying to say like the number one center is a very important position. And I only picked second best to ask you the question because like obviously anyone's taking McDavid over any goalie, right? Like that's
I mean, you're asking me a hypothetical that's, again, it's pretty who would you rather again, how many?
But we're talking about the most important position, so I was asking you.
Look, if I have the chance to get a top 5 elite goaltender in the NHL, I'm taking that. If I can't have one of the top 5 guys, then my priorities shift a little bit. They would. But I would also take Cale Makar before I took Nathan McKinnon. I would take him before I would have McKinnon. Best defenseman in the NHL. I mean, like, unless I could have McDavid, I'd take Makar. Makar would be my guy. Yeah. If you ask me, would I take McDavid?
Ooh, okay.
McDavid would be the guy for that. But we're not sitting here playing Johnny's hypothetical fantasy draft for the next 20 minutes. I'm not doing that. I indulged you for a few seconds there, and now I'm done on that. Indulging you on that.
Well, I appreciate you doing it for me. Thank you.
But I gave you about 30 seconds there of your stupid fantasy games. So
hey,
look,
you started the conversation. You asked.
I think
you asked. What's the most important position?
I think we need to wrap this conversation on the Florida Panthers, and I'm going to ask you the same question that you asked Ed Jovanovski. Who is your Conn Smythe pick? Florida Panthers win the Stanley Cup. Who's your Conn Smythe pick?
I think it's going to be a defenseman.
And for everybody in the chat, if the Florida Panthers win this series, who needs to be the Conn Smythe? Who needs to be the guy that goes to another level in this series to help them win? Drop your guy in the chat who you think will be the Conn Smythe if the Florida Panthers win. If
I said it's going to be defenseman originally, but I think it's going to be Barkov. If Barkov can shut those guys down, it might be one of those, and we joked about it yesterday, like the Andre Iguodala, NBA Finals MVP when he shut down. I mean, he didn't really shut down. LeBron still averaged like 30 points a game, but like he slowed LeBron down in that series in I think 2015. And I think Barkov will kind of be the same if he can limit McDavid's production in the final. So I'm going to say Barkov. Who do you got?
Who do I have? I think probably Barkov. I think he's been their best player, and I think if they're going to win, he'll need to continue to be their best player. I think that's the way this is trending. Obviously Kachuk could have a big series. Bob might have to be really good this series, but I believe it'll be Barkov. I think if they're going to win the Stanley Cup, Sasha Barkov is going to have to be the guy. We've got, a number of people throwing it in there. We've got some Barkovs from Hansley. Muhammad says Barkov. Shane O says Lundell. Jay Wong, Kachuk, Jay Miller, Bob. Weinberg says, Colby's favorite goalie will always be Anton Hudobin. We could probably spend a whole hour. I could be telling you funny shit that came out of Anton Hudobin's mouth over the years of playing with him. Jeremiah, it's Bob or Barkov if Florida wins. It'll be McDavid if the Oilers win, period. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because I think Draisaitl can always go off in this series with the fact that McDavid is going to be drawing Barkov and Forsling probably, especially when they're in Florida for game 1 and 2. I mean, you're going to have to go through Barkov at center, and then you're going to have to go through Ekblad and Forsling. So there's an opportunity potentially for Draisaitl to get better looks with that second pair with Montour's group or with Ekman Larsson's group on the third. So I don't think it's as much of a slam dunk, Jeremiah, as like I
think Hyman too.
But I think most likely you're right, but it's not a done deal as I think you're kind of stating it. If Hyman gets to 20 goals, is he in the conversation? I got to think he is. I really do. It's voted on by the PH, like the Writers Association. So, the stat sheet is going to light up a lot of their eyes, because a lot of them have no idea what they're talking about. A lot of them have no idea what they're watching. A lot of the writers don't even watch. They're too busy tweeting, and they're too busy writing their story that they got to submit. So they miss half of the game. And so
not me.
Yeah, that's exactly who you are.
Not me.
If the score sheet has a lot of Hyman and not a lot of McDavid, it could happen if the Edmonton Oilers win. But we'll save that for tomorrow. Today is about the Florida Panthers and who we think they should win. So, let's move on here, Johnny. We've got another couple of quick topics we want to get into. I'd like to finish with some of your New York Rangers stuff at the end from breakup day.
Yeah, I don't think we need a lot of that.
But before we go there, and this is meant to be interactive to everybody. I know yesterday was our goodbye to the Dallas Stars, but Joe Pavelski said yesterday this is it for him. No official announcement yet, but he said this is it for me. Wyatt Johnston said he's going to have to find a new place to live. Pavelski said he's done. The question that we have for everybody, okay, is Joe Pavelski a Hall of Famer? We are going to put this in the chat right now, and there you see it. As far as, is Joe Pavelski a Hall of Famer? So if you're watching our show or you're listening to our show right now on YouTube, do us a favor, throw your vote in there. If you want, you can write in the chat why you think that he is or he isn't. You can make your arguments. All right. The other thing I'll ask you while you're getting involved in this, throw the episode a like. All right. Give the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel a subscribe, like the episode. You guys have been great with that. It helps us. We move up the algorithm. Our views have been growing. All good stuff for next season. So let's hear what everybody thinks. And Johnny, I'm going to kick it back to you for you to tell me and for you to sit on the fence like you always do.
I'm not sitting on the fence, and I actually hate that this is what I'm saying, but I say no.
You do not think he's a Hall of Famer?
I don't think he is. And I know recency bias is probably going to make everyone think that he is, but there's a lot of guys that have the same exact accolades as Joe Pavelski that aren't in the Hall of Fame. And some guys I think of are like Patrick Elias, Keith Kachuk, Rod Brindamore. I know Roenick I've said, but that's for other reasons that you said.
Did Brindamore have, well, first of all, Brindamore won a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
But did Brindamore have 1,000 points in the NHL?
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
What were Brindamore's stats in the NHL?
I think they're actually in our rundown. He had 1,184 points in 1,484 games played.
Yeah, so he
but these other guys too, like Elias has a couple cups. He's not in it. Brindamore has a cup. He's not in it. Like Pavelski hasn't won anything.
Well, the thing that is striking to me is Keith Kachuk. And I'll tell you why the Keith Kachuk thing is really striking to me, because he scored over 500 goals, right? And Vic, correct me if I'm wrong here in our conversation in the chat. Do these include playoff numbers, or are these just regular season numbers? So these are just regular season numbers. So Keith Kachuk had 538 goals Okay, 1,065 points. And that doesn't include playoffs, which I'm sure, he scored a decent amount more in the playoffs. So, when you see that, it definitely makes you wonder if this guy has done enough to become a Hall of Famer. And let's see how the poll's looking. So far, we've got 30 votes. Come on, we could get more votes than 30 votes. We have way more than 30 people that are even active in the show right now. 65% are saying yes, and 35% are saying no. So Jonny is a no. Did you vote? Did you put your no vote in there, Jonny?
No.
Oh, I just lost the poll. I don't know what just happened.
I voted no.
I'm gonna go back to the live chat. There we go. So if you're here, throw your vote in, because this seems to be an interesting topic that different people are saying different things on. I look at the fact that he's got 476 goals during the regular season. He's got another, I think, 75 playoff goals or something like that. I forget. So in his career, he's got over 500 goals, which I think is a huge number. And I think he's
had a great career.
Yeah.
No one's denying that. But when you look at what gets you into the Hall of Fame, it's like,
what is he overall in the history of the NHL in scoring? Because you told me this yesterday. I forget. Do you remember?
I told you this yesterday.
I thought you said he's like in 70th place. Oh, there we go. 71st place overall all time in scoring in the NHL. So he's a top 75 scorer all time in a league that's been around for quite some time. And understand this, there's been, I think it's about 9,000 or 9,500. I don't know what the number's up to. Vic, maybe you could do a quick Google search on this. How many people have ever played in the NHL? I believe the number's somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000. It's not as much as you would have thought, Jonny. I the first time I ever heard that number,
that's low.
I would have thought it was way higher, but it's only been about, again, it's like 8,500 people or something like that.
Insane.
Just
play one game?
Just who have played a game in the NHL. You can look that up online. But I don't know, man. I don't know if he gets in on the first ballot, but I do think he gets into the Hall of Fame. I really do. I think
I hope he does.
1,300 plus games, over 1,000 points. He played in a couple of Olympics. I know they didn't win, but he constantly, made Olympic teams and U.S. World Cup teams. And, I think he finds his way in. The poll in our chat is getting closer. Now we're down to 54% and 46%. So, Jonny, I think you're doing a good job potentially, swaying people away. And I think as we're reading some of these guys off,
here's what
let me say one more thing. I do think Keith Tkachuk will get into the Hall of Fame. I don't think Jeremy Roenick will get into the Hall of Fame, and not because of hockey. I love JR. He's one of my very good friends. When we were in Chicago, my wife and I spent a lot of time with him and his family because they were in there all the time for different business things that he has going on in Chicago. But I got to tell you, he's not in the Hall of Fame, not because of hockey. He's being kept out of the Hall of Fame for other reasons. It's total garbage. It's total bullshit. So he's not really the right guy to run this comparison through.
Patrick Marleau is not in the Hall of Fame either, right? But he retired a little more recently. Yeah.
But just remember, not everybody gets in the first ballot. Not everybody's Henrik Lundqvist, who never won a Stanley Cup and got in right away, right?
Sure.
So, I do think some of this has to do with popularity, and some of this has to do with, recency bias. Like, all those things are true.
But there's no accolades for Pavelski. Not one. Not one. There's never a scoring title, never, and that's tough. And I think when you hear Joe Pavelski's name, it's kind of like it's like legendary status now because he's played so long. I mean, the guy's 39 years old right now. But when you look at who is in the Hall of Fame and who's left out, it's like, oh, how could he be in over that guy if that guy's not in? So I think when you really kind of just look at the criteria it takes to get there, it's not as easy of an answer as it might seem.
Yeah. Well, look, we're going to leave this poll open for like another minute. So get your vote in. because we're gonna move along here. Get your votes in for the next minute or so, and then Vic's gonna close the poll. While you're in there putting your vote in, make sure you throw a like on the episode as we continue to move along here. So I do agree with some of the things people are saying, about JR. It's crazy that he's not in. And again, the reason he's not in my opinion, is very politically driven. I think that it's really disappointing when that type of stuff creeps into hockey. So anyways, Johnny, let's quickly hit on what Brad Treliving said yesterday about the Mitch Marner situation, because we did talk about that on the show yesterday. And then we'll wrap with some of the things you heard during Jonny, Lazarus, and the New York Rangers breakup day. Since you're going to be an Islanders fan, apparently now, since you're Mr. Islanders on social media.
No, I'm an Islander hater.
But, yesterday, Brad Treliving said, we're not going to give a play-by-play on it. We've got to look at every possible way for our team to get better. Mitch controls a lot of this whole thing. If there's a way to make our team better, we're going to do it. But we're certainly not going to just make a trade just so we can pound our chest and say, look, we're different. And again, I believe that. I really do. I believe that, because Mitch Marner is in full control of this situation. And I don't care what Frank says about it on this show, or or he rolls his eyes at me, or we go back and forth about it for a second time, because we did it a few weeks back. That situation is going to be way more difficult because of the control that the player has, because he's only got a year left on his contract. Is he really going to help the Leafs and do a sign-in trade when they're pushing him out the door? There's so many factors here. And I just think that this is going to be a long, drawn-out process. And honestly, I'm just making a guess here. I'm making a guess. Mitch Marner is in the lineup night one for the Toronto Maple Leafs next season. That is the prediction and the guess that I am going to make. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Johnny.
I agree with you. I don't think this is something that they have to rush, right? Like, you can kind of use it also maybe as leverage come deadline time, if possible, right? Is that something they're thinking about? Depending on the
these types of deals are generally happening at the draft. They really are, because this is a very, very complex situation. There's got to be
you know more about this than I do, to be honest.
If Toronto wants to get the legitimate return for him that he's worth, they need an extension done. But what extension does he agree to? And what team that's contending, that's watched him play in the playoffs, is giving him $13 million a year that he's going to want? Right? Like, all of these things make this just so difficult. And I could very well see this thing playing out. I really could.
Yeah. I think this is going to be a longer process than Maple Leafs fans would like. And I know, and honestly, I hope it is, just because I think this conversation is, I don't want to say fun, but it's entertaining. We got Vic texting us every day with Marner updates, which is hilarious, because if it were up to Vic would probably just have his ass parked on the bench all year.
Well, Vic thinks they should just put him in the stands and force him out, but you can't do that. You cannot take it out on a player that they won't waive their no trade clause and put them in the stands, because what's going to happen is the players union files a grievance. You cannot do that. It just happened with Russell Wilson in the NFL, where he was threatened by the Broncos. If you don't change your contract, we're benching you, blah, blah, blah. And now that's being investigated. So you can't do that in sports.
Yeah. I don't really got much else to be honest on this. Any other?
Okay. So let's Chef Risher, just to address your comment in the chat. I never did. Not something I ever dealt with.
What was the question?
He asked me kind of an off the board question. So okay. I'm just letting him know. Nope, never dealt with it in sports, at least not to my knowledge. You never know. In the world right now, it seems, like maybe there was some of it, but I certainly never dealt with it personally in my sports career. So let's finish with a quick, understanding from you, Johnny, about Rangers breakup day.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I just want to say this. I've been sending Johnny tweets that I've been seeing from Rangers Twitter accounts that interact with our show. So now they kind of show up on my, our popular page on Twitter. And I have seen some really unhinged shit
Oh my God,
coming from Ranger fans. I mean, like, it is unhinged what I am seeing. And I get it. People are angry and emotional, but like, you need to seriously understand that your team just went to the Final Four of the NHL playoffs for the second time in 3 years. And people that are saying the wheels came off. When did the wheels come off playing against the best team in the NHL, getting to 6 games? How many games were 1 goal? What about overtime? Like, again, they lost to a better team, and you could probably be a little annoyed that Drury didn't do more at the deadline. And I think, again, what did Julien Brisebois do when they didn't have a successful cup run the first time around? He added Blake Coleman. Then he added Barclay Goodrow. So what Chris Drury needs to learn as a newer general manager is how he needs to manage the deadline. He swung and he missed with Kane and Tarasenko. He swung and he missed with Roslovic and Wenberg. Although
he more so bunted.
I wouldn't say he struck out on Wenberg. I think Wenberg was a safe single, but I think Roslovic was a complete strikeout. 3 pitches, third pitch, you didn't even get your bat off your shoulder.
Yeah,
so
strikeout looking.
He needs to learn how to manage the deadline because he just hasn't done a good enough job. But this whole blow up the Rangers thing is crazy. If there's a way to move on from Zibanejad or somebody where you're getting better value back, I don't know how that's going to happen. But if you can make your team better, you do. But this Rangers group is really good. The core is good. And in 2 years, $20 million in cap space opens up with Trouba and Panarin. I don't know what's going to happen with Panarin, but there's a lot of opportunity to sustain what the New York Rangers have right now. And then you think Loft's going to be better. What about Hoffman? He's got to come in and be a heavy forward who can play somewhere in your lineup. There are guys who are available in free agency. I'd like to see them invest in their back end more, but okay. I said I was going to give it to you quickly. I just rambled on. Yep. Sorry about that.
No, I expected it.
Talk to us about yesterday.
Well, there was one comment too that I got on Twitter from someone who listens to our show, I believe also. I think his Twitter account's like JT. And he made a good point too, which I agree with. Like, this Ranger core kind of can give you the Washington Capitals vibes, right? Like, the Capitals were always knocking on the door. Couldn't get out of the second round though. Like, they never made it to the conference final until they ended up winning the cup. But the Capitals didn't like jump ship and trade everyone. They just kept building around those same pieces, and eventually they got it done. Like, the Rangers can continue to do that. Like, there are people saying you can't win with Panarin, you can't win with Zibanejad. Yes, you can, but you got to have the supporting pieces to help them do it, And I'm not one to give up on those guys. Did they not play up to par in the conference final? Yes, I think they didn't. But they played against a fucking really good Florida Panther team, and they know that. It was tough on them. But yesterday, Vinny Trocheck had, to me, the quote of the day. Like, they molded their identity this year. And, I think before the season started, had you have said the Rangers will get to 2 wins away from the Stanley Cup final, I think most people would say, I don't know. There's a lot of good teams in the East. I don't see them coming out of the East or being that close. But they proved a lot to themselves this year, especially after a year that they had last year where there were a lot of questions to be answered, and those questions were, will Lafreniere sink or swim? Like, Kakko is another question. And Kakko right now is a tough one because he could be a guy that's going to end up getting traded potentially, because something that also was said yesterday, and now I'm rambling, but Colby, I don't know if you saw this quote. Kakko said, when you're given the chance with Zibanejad and Kreider, you have to score goals.
Well, the question was like, do you feel like you're never given a chance to succeed here, basically, or whatever the question was?
It was, do you see yourself as a top 6 guy here?
And he said, I got opportunities. I didn't produce. If you play with those guys, you don't produce. So he took some accountability.
Yeah.
That's a really, I don't know what they're going to do with him. Go ahead.
Yeah. But then Laviolette on the flip side said, that's on me as a coach too. My job is to find a way for these players to flourish. And I couldn't find it with Kakko, and that was their conversation.
That needs to be addressed. What is his value like, because that's a hard one. But look, everything we saw at Lafreniere, he's going to have to be even better and more consistent next year. You need a guy like Othman to come in and $900,000 on your salary cap and be able to, maybe produce and score 15 goals next year as a first year NHLer full time and produce 35 points on the third line. Right. And so all of a sudden you think about that. Lafreniere is going to have a little bit of a better year. And then hopefully, Schneider kind of finally becomes a top 4 guy instead of a guy who, moves from the second to the third pair. That's what teams have to do. It's not just the core. There's other young players around it, new guys, draft picks, guys that can come up. I don't mind that defenseman Mackey is it Connor Mackey or McKay, whatever, in Hartford. I think he's a big, strong defenseman. Jones maybe finally gets a look. Maybe they go out and they entertain Brett Pesce. I think he'd look really damn good in New York Ranger colors.
New York guy also
with his size, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe it's a smaller, it's a reunion with Brady Shea. I don't know the answer, but they need to go out and make some minor improvements.
Mm-hmm.
But the blow it up narrative around the New York Rangers, you're a couple of bounces away. And even though Florida was better, you're still only a few bounces away from going to the finals. Mika hits a post in that series in a game that's tight. Some breakaway saves by Bob. Now, look, you could say the other way too, because Shesterkin was Shesterkin. But hey, Shesterkin is Shesterkin, and he's your guy. And if Jonathan Quick can play the way he played this year, next year, you have an ability to do a 60-40 and keep Shesterkin a little more fresh for the playoffs, which I think he was this year, because I think Jonathan Quick did play a good amount of games, because at times he played better. Yeah. I think we know that there were struggles. But I think Ranger fans back away from the ledge. I think the Rangers are going to be good next year. Maybe not a president's team, but maybe you don't care about that, right? Maybe you just want to be good and get in, and then, turn up the gas in the playoffs.
I want to ask you about this, because I've been getting a lot of DMs about it, and I think it's the stupidest thing ever. But I don't know if you can just touch on this quickly, Colby, as a player and a guy who, was with a Stanley Cup team. But, I know Merle said it on Chicklets the other day or something, that the Rangers, he heard rumors the Rangers had their girlfriends and wives down in Florida for games 3 and 4 and were on the beach on the off day. Like, I don't really want to entertain this, because I think it's a stupid, I'm not saying anything about Merles. Like, I love Merles, trust Merles, whatever. But even if that is or isn't true, like, these guys, they're human beings. Like, it's not that they're out partying, like, there's so many Ranger fans in my DMs asking me about it, and it's been very annoying. But like, even if guys have their girlfriends and wives on a trip for 3 and 4,
look, I don't necessarily think guys are saying like, hey, come on down, like, let's hang out. Like, here's how it goes. When a team goes into a playoff series, there's going to be a group of younger wives and girlfriends that don't have a bunch of kids and this and that travel and go like to watch the games, right? It's every team in the NHL. Florida's unique, right? Because you're spending a lot of time outside when you're in Florida. I remember when I was working for the Blackhawks, we played the Panthers on a Thursday and Tampa on a Saturday, and we went down on a Monday, and the team practiced Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Florida. Well, I had my wife fly down to Florida just to spend the week down there, because we were already down there. I had a hotel room on the beach. Okay. And so I think, look, when you get to the conference finals, I have to hope that the players were mature enough to realize that they needed to stay focused, right? Mm-hmm. And having your wives and girlfriends there isn't a big deal. Now, if they're out, partying, if they're all out on the beach, day drinking and playing volleyball, well, then that's a problem, because it's the playoffs. And you don't go out in the playoffs until you win your series. That's when you go out. There was maybe 1 or 2 nights the Bruins, the Bruins team I was on went out until the cup was won. And it was when we swept the Flyers, because there was a lot of free time after that sweep. There was a little bit of fun that happened after the Montreal series, which was round 1. I can't remember about the Tampa series, which was the 3rd round. I do think there was a night that there was a night right after the game. Everybody went out that night, because there was a few days before the Stanley Cup Finals, but everybody took it easy. It wasn't a crazy night, but all the wives were there, the girlfriends, everyone. So I don't know. I don't think it's as big a deal. I think it's really normal, though. You see the families traveling, to watch their significant others play. Yeah. Listen, when you play professional sports, yes, you're the one who plays. Your name's on the jersey. your last name's on the jersey, but your name's in the handbook and the contract and whatever. But it's a family commitment. This lifestyle, while the money's amazing, it's a family commitment. You're on the road a lot. Women are home with their children. A lot of these wives and girlfriends work, so they've got help. You know what I mean? So it's a family thing. And when you make it to the finals and the conference finals, it's exciting. Our even my wife, who did not know me when I played, only did TV. Like, she would watch a lot of the Hawks games when I was doing them because she wanted to support me, right? That's just like how it goes. And so I don't think it's as big a deal as maybe Merle's. I don't think Merle's thinks it's that big a deal.
Merle's just trying to,
starting shit.
Yeah.
But I would need more details, Johnny, for me to really say if I thought it's inappropriate or appropriate.
Well, same here, but there are people like, you should have asked the players. I'm not fucking asking the players that question on breakup day. Like,
yeah. And then you have people that say, like Hansley Way says, it's a business trip. You're right. It's a business trip. But here's the thing. You don't know, like, just because they're there, it doesn't even mean they're staying with them.
They're probably not. They're probably not.
Most likely not. Most likely the wives and the girlfriends are all staying elsewhere. Okay. And they're out partying and doing their own thing. Just look at social media. They all get matching jackets or jerseys or vests or shirts. It's actually become a thing. And they all try to one up each other with who's got.
It's actually fun. It's fun. I love it. Yeah.
It's just, listen, it's part of the world we live in now with social media and everything else. So it's okay for your families to come, especially when it's in a desirable location like Florida.
On Memorial Day weekend.
Listen, when we were in the Cup finals, the Bruins were flying the families on a second plane to Vancouver to watch the games. So our charter would go. And then a day later, like on game day, they'd fly another plane out there that the team paid for with everybody's families, girlfriends, wives, parents, whatever. So it's not crazy abnormal to see that. I bet you the Edmonton Oilers wives, and same with the Florida Panthers wives and girlfriends, will do a lot of traveling this series. And it wouldn't shock me if it was team sponsored travel, because they're not easy places to go back and forth. They're not, right? So listen, I as long as they weren't out drinking all day on the beach,
boogie boarding,
playing volleyball and boogie boarding, then but you're in Florida, you're gonna go for a walk, you want to get some sun, you want, that stuff is fine. It's still a business trip, but that's okay. Like, you don't sit in your hotel room and stare at the walls.
No, I think New York sports fans are just scarred from that Giants picture on the yacht. Remember
that was bad. That was really bad.
I think that's where this anger is coming from.
But the New York Rangers did not do that. And I do know the New York Rangers had their team dinner last night, and there were no wives and girlfriends. It was just the players. They
didn't go.
You didn't show up as a super fan, and all I can tell you is, Johnny, I'm a little disappointed because they didn't leave a very good tip. So,
really?
Bad
leadership, they're never going to win.
I heard, from what I understood, Lafreniere was the one who put his card down. It declined, and then one of the vets had to step up, and because they had a bigger limit on their Amex. So, I'm just messing with you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they enjoyed a nice team dinner last night in New York City. A little wrap up. Some teams go on a trip. Some teams do a team dinner. We all saw what the Bruins did. That picture made it all over social media. So, all right, Johnny, I think that's probably what we got. If you haven't liked the episode, it'll be my last time asking. Throw us a like, subscribe DFO. Lots of content all day, every day on the YouTube page. The growth has been amazing. Tomorrow, Edmonton Oilers. We're going to focus on Edmonton. We're going to get an Edmonton guest, maybe even two guests tomorrow. Depending on, like I said, we Gregor might jump on with us right off the hop before his podcast films, and then or records, and then we're working on a player to get on from the Edmonton Oilers. We're hoping that's going to work.
Colby, one of the best comments I think we've ever had in the history of the show. Weinberg 85. Guess Loft can't even get points on his Amex card.
That may be the worst thing Colby has ever said.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. I'm cracking up, Weinberg. That was awesome. That was funny. But yes, tomorrow should be a great show. Today was a fun one. Big thanks to Ed Jovanovski.
Jovo, as you called him.
Yes, Jovo. Vic is the best as always.
No shame.
Forgetting him. What?
I said you have no shame, Jovo.
No shame.
Just calling him Jovo.
Well, I met him last year at the Cup final and interviewed him for the NHL YouTube show that I did. So
you guys are boys.
Yeah, like we're essentially best friends.
You're boys. And Vic calls him Mr. Jovanovski.
Yeah. But yeah, should be a fun one tomorrow. Have a great night, everyone, tonight. It's date night, Colby. So we'll report.
Oh, you have a date tonight?
We'll report back tomorrow.
Tomorrow...
and I gotta shout out my dad. Today's my dad's 60th birthday.
All right. Happy birthday, Mr. Laz.
Yeah.
We appreciate the role you played at bringing this unique individual here to us on Morning Cup of Hockey and to the world of sports.
Yeah. So some personal stuff to get into tomorrow morning, possibly before we welcome on some Oilers guests. We'll see how it goes.
We'll save date night till the end of the show.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.